So I've been keeping chameleons for 5 years now, which seems like a lot, but also not a lot in the grand scheme of how long people have been keeping chameleons. But just in those 5 years, we've seen so many changes in chameleon care and husbandry. So today I'm going to be sharing with you guys some things of how we used to keep chameleons and how we keep chameleons now. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the cool thing about the chameleon hobby is that we're constantly evolving, constantly challenging the way that we keep chameleons and trying to work towards giving our chameleons even longer lives. The average lifespan for a chameleon is 5 to 7 years. So if we can get to the point where the average is now 10 years, like that would be amazing. But the only way we're going to do that is by constantly changing and working towards improving our chameleon care. So I've been keeping them for about 5 years now, and just in that time, I've seen a lot of changes when it comes to chameleon care. So the first thing that I remember when I was first getting started, that the recommended basking temperature was 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Specifically for veiled, it was like 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Now the recommended basking temperature is 80 to 85. That's like a 10-degree difference. And the reason for this is that the lower temperatures seem to help increase their life expectancy. So we've seen some improvements from there. But thinking of like keeping my guys at 95, 100 degrees Fahrenheit nowadays is just wild. Another thing that was super popular when I was first getting started was to mist your chameleon 3 times a day. Once in the morning, once in the middle of the day, and once in the evening. Nowadays, we don't recommend misting in the middle of the day. We recommend misting once in the morning before lights turn on and once in the evening after lights turn off. That midday misting just made our enclosure so wet and moist and super humid and super warm with those hot temperatures, super high humidity, and just moist and wet enclosure. So I remember distinctly the day that I took out my morning misting on my Mist King timer. But yeah, pretty wild. Another thing that we used to use all the time are T8 UVB bulbs. So nowadays the recommendation is a T5, which is a more efficient type of bulb. It's a newer technology than the T8s. T8 still can be used, but you would have to use a T8 10.0 to get close to the T5 5.0, and really the T5s are just now the kind of industry chameleon care standard. But back in the day when I got Neptune's enclosure off Craigslist, it actually came with a T8 UVB bulb. So there you go, fun little fact. Another thing I remember hearing all the time was to never use mealworms. Like mealworms were a big no-no. It was not there was just this taboo of using mealworms, of these forbidden bug, and you were a terrible keeper if you fed your chameleon mealworms. Now I feel like that's lessened. Now I feel like mealworms are seen more as a treat bug or something that you can sporadically use. I personally don't use mealworms with my chameleons just because I feed them a variety of other bugs. I don't really think it's necessary to feed mealworms because they don't have a lot of nutritional value as compared to other bugs that are available. But I feel like it's less big red X vibes towards mealworms now, which is kind of nice to see. Luna, get off, honey. You can't be climbing. Here you go. Let's go. Yeah. Okay, well, now we have Luna, if you want to come out, so here we go. Okay, so another one I wanted to talk about were glass enclosures. Glass enclosures were seen as evil. If you use a glass enclosure, you're going to kill your chameleon. Now, glass enclosures are, I think, a little more accepted, especially for people that live in dry, cold environments. What's becoming more common, I'm just paranoid you're going to poop on me. What's becoming more common are hybrid enclosures, which didn't even exist 5 years ago. So the issue with glass enclosures, in my opinion, is that it's really hard to find a glass enclosure that's big enough for a chameleon that's 48 inches tall. Most of them are much smaller than that. So hybrid enclosures are becoming more of the thing to help hold in that humidity and have temperature regulation. Okay, so those of you who have been keeping chameleons for a while will know how we used to have a 3 supplement schedule. Now it's 2 supplements. You would use the calcium without D3 every single feeding, and then using a multivitamin with D3 1 to 2 times a month, depending on your species. Well, it used to be even more confusing in that you would use calcium without D3 every feeding. Then once a week you would use calcium with D3, and then the alternating week you would use a multivitamin without D3, and that just got really confusing for new keepers to keep track of. So we've now just started recommending using a multivitamin that already has the D3 in it versus alternating between 3 different supplements, which can just be a lot. It used to be the standard to recommend that females go into an 18 by 18 by 36 inch tall enclosure. The thought process behind this was that females were smaller, so they can have smaller enclosures. But I've always pushed for having females in a 24 by 24 by 48 inch tall enclosure because they also have to have a lane bin inside their enclosure. I think more and more people are kind of getting behind that of just recommending as large of an enclosure as possible. And currently 24 by 24 by 48 is what's readily available for people, so that's what we recommend for both male and females. Speaking of females, another big thing was to have giant lane bins. Some people would use full trash cans, some people would have like a whole foot of like substrate for their chameleons to lay their eggs. What we have found is that the females want the hard surface at the bottom. So you could give them 6 inches or you could give them 2 feet and they were still digging down to the bottom to have that hard surface to lay against for their eggs. So we've decided to offer them shorter lane bins so then it's less stress and less work on them to be able to lay their eggs. I think people still use these, but the, did you want another hand? No, just hanging out. I think people still use these, but back in the day, it was really popular to use quad and dual fixtures. So it's a fixture that holds 2 bulbs or 4 bulbs. And so people would have 1 plant, bulb and then 1 T5, UVB bulb, or 3 plant bulbs and 1 UVB bulb. I think those are becoming less and less common and people are going back to having single bulb fixtures, but those used to be super popular. But the UVB output was different for a dual, quad, and single bulb fixture, so I think that's kind of phasing out. Okay, so going to bioactive and plants, bioactive was not a thing. It was a thing in the reptile hobby, but it wasn't a thing in the chameleon hobby. Very few people were going bioactive with their enclosures. They were out there, there just weren't many of them. I think the reptile hobby as a whole is moving towards more bioactive enclosures, so the chameleon hobby is also kind of following suit. So it's been really cool to see more and more people having bioactive chameleon enclosures. And if you're in the bioactive world, then the Bio Dude is one of the leading people for a bioactive substrate. He sells this awesome thing called the Bio Shot. So I'm actually affiliated with the Bio Dude. So if at any point you want to shop there for live plants or any bioactive supplies, code Neptune10 always saves you 10% off every single order. And then speaking of, we're going on an adventure. Speaking of plants, about 5 years ago, there was only a handful of live plants that people would use that felt comfortable because, of being nervous of chameleons, eating the plants. But I feel like nowadays we have a huge list of plants that have been safely tested by chameleons. And by that, I mean a chameleon has eaten the plant and hasn't had any adverse effects or anything like that. Here you go, we're climbing. So it's cool to see that more and more plants are being used for chameleon enclosures. And I could keep going on and on. There's just so many of these. But another one I remember people using were bendy vines, fake vines. Those were super popular. I think more and more people are going towards more naturalistic enclosures. I also saw a lot of bamboo back in the day, but bamboo's pretty slippery for a chameleon to climb, so I don't see many people using it anymore. You need a hand? Yeah, those mossy vines, anyone else remember those? Those were super popular. But then they would start flaking off and people were like, well, maybe this isn't a good idea. But there you go, just sharing some things about, chameleon care and how it's evolved. I'm excited to see where the next 5 years come and go with chameleon care. I would love to see larger enclosures like 4x4s readily available for people. I'd love to see more plants, more naturalistic hydration methods, improvements with our UVB. We can phase out supplements altogether. That'd be super cool to see, but time will tell. And we've got lots of people who are working on that to see how we can best care for these little guys. So, Luna, do you want to do the outro? Yeah, I think I'll have to do that one. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments down below. Let me know, what are some things you remember when you first got into chameleon keeping that are different than how we care for them now? And as always, you can subscribe so when I post a new video. You can follow Neptune, all my chameleons, including Miss Luna, on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, don't climb in my hair. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Say bye, Luna. Luna, get off, honey. You can't be climbing. Ah, your little nails. Okay, if you poop on me though, we're gonna have a serious problem.